A few years ago, I was sitting in a traffic jam, completely stuck with not even an inch of movement. Within me, I could feel the frustrations building because I had places to be. Just then, I look over and I see this guy in his car. He's laughing, like full on laughing, windows down and music blaring. In that moment, I could only wonder what the party was about because this situation is not supposed to be funny. And that's when it hits me. It is not about the situation. No, it never is about the situation. It is how you see it. And perspective is everything. You see, two people can go through the exact same thing and come out with completely different results. One person sees a roadblock, the other sees a detour. One may see failure, the other person sees feedback. Same facts, different lenses, different life. An interesting part is that your perspective isn't fixed, nor is it something you're born with and stuck with forever. It's something you can change, train, and upgrade. There's this old story about two men in prison. They were both cellmates, so technically, they were confined to the same space. One of them looks out the window and all he sees is mud, ugliness, and the pain of being locked up. But the other guy looks out the same window and sees the stars, hope, and possibilities of being free. Both of them are in the same space, sharing the same view, but have different perspectives and experiences. That's life. See, in this life, as long as you are breathing, you will face hardships, have setbacks, disappointment, and encounter situations that feel impossible. That is a guarantee. However, what is not guaranteed is how you interpret them. You can look at your current situation and see a dead end, or you can see it as a setup for something better. You can interpret it as proof that you're not good enough, or take it as training for what is coming next. The path you choose is completely up to you. The facts don't change, but your interpretation of those facts is what changes everything. Let me tell you about Joseph, the biblical character, and you might know this story. His brothers hated him, sold him into slavery. He ends up in Egypt, falsely accused, thrown in prison, years of his life wasted. From any normal perspective, that is a tragedy and an unfairly ruined life. But here is what Joseph said later when he finally confronted his brothers. Genesis 50 verse 20. He said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph could have spent his whole life bitter, angry, and focused on the injustice, and he probably would have been justified. But instead, his interpretation was different. In contrast, he could have taken the route of pain and revenge on his brothers, focusing on the hurt. The thing you must understand is this: it is not what happens to you, but what you make out of it. If you lose your job, that's a fact. But is it a disaster or an opportunity? That's interpretation. You fail at something you worked hard on? That's a fact. But is it proof that you're not good enough or an indication that you need to try a different approach? That's interpretation. Someone disrespects you? That's a fact. But is it about you or about them? Again, that's interpretation. The same event can destroy one person and make another person stronger. The only differentiating factor is in their perspectives and their interpretation of the event. Most people don't realize they have a choice in this. They think their perspective is just automatic. The typical wording is, "That's just who I am." But that's not true. Your perspective is a skill, and like any skill, you can develop it. There's this concept from ancient philosophy taught by the Stoics. It says, the obstacle is the way. What does that mean? It means the thing you think is in your way is actually the way forward. That thing you're trying to avoid is exactly what you need to go through to become who you need to be. For instance, suppose you want to learn a new skill and you don't have money to buy the courses. That is not the problem. That's the training. Learning to build with limited resources could make you better than if you started with unlimited funding. If you keep starting projects but never finishing them, that is not necessarily a lack of discipline. That's unclear vision. It is probably teaching you that you need a stronger why before you commit to the how. See what I'm doing there? I'm taking the same facts and reframing them, not ignoring the difficulty or pretending it is easy, but choosing to see it as useful instead of just painful. That shift in perspective changes how you approach it, and how you approach it determines whether you win or quit. The key difference is this: when people are stuck, they believe life is happening to them. They are a victim of their circumstances and there's nothing they can do about it. But people who break through believe life is happening for them, even the hard and painful stuff. To them, everything is training and preparation. All things work together for their good. Again, it is the same life viewed from different lenses. And before you say, oh, that's just toxic positivity, let me be clear. I'm not saying pretend bad things are good. I'm saying you get to choose what you focus on, or what story you tell yourself about what is happening. And that choice determines everything. Because here's the thing: when you see yourself as a victim, you give away your power, waiting for circumstances to change before you can move forward. You will be stuck. But when you see yourself as someone life is preparing, you take that power back and start asking, what can I learn from this? How can I use this? What is this making me into? And those questions changes everything completely. Let me talk about gratitude for a second, because practicing gratitude is dependent on your perspective. See, it is possible to look at your life and focus on what is not working or perfect at the moment, but that doesn't help anybody. Instead, you can choose to keep your focus on what is working and be grateful for where you are and what you have in the moment. The choice of gratitude is really up to you. Again, same life, different perspective. And I'm not talking about some surface level fake gratitude where you pretend everything is perfect. What I'm talking about is the kind of gratitude that sees reality clearly and still chooses to appreciate what is there. You might not have the income you want yet, but if you have the ability to work, the skills to trade, and the time to invest, then you have something to be grateful for. You may not have the relationship you want yet, but there are people who care about you. Again, something to be grateful for. There's also a dangerous side to perspective. Social media. When you scroll through Instagram, everyone seems to be winning and making it in life. LinkedIn is even the worst because everybody is a CEO. And when you compare your reality, it feels small, like you're failing. So the pressure is on. However, what you're actually doing is comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. You see their best moments, they see your worst day. That's not a fair comparison. And even worse, you don't know their story. You don't know what they had to sacrifice, went through, or are dealing with behind closed doors. That guy with a perfect life may have gone through several failed businesses before that one. He may have had sleepless nights, been in debt, had doubts he had to deal with. You don't see all that because failures don't make a viral post. That couple you think have the perfect marriage, they didn't post all the hard conversations, fights and quarrels they had before they got to the gram. You're judging your whole journey based off of someone else's one post. And that perspective will destroy you. What you should be doing instead is focusing on yourself. Run your race, track your progress, and take joy in what you're building. Instead of comparisons, simply measure your own progress against your goals. Are you better than you were last month? Last year? Are you growing? Are you learning? Are you moving forward? That's the only perspective that actually helps you. Let me be honest with you. Sometimes what feels like a delay is actually protection. A setback could be a setup. Look, this doesn't mean that perspective makes everything easy. Don't get me wrong. Your problems will not just disappear simply because you had positive thoughts. Life is hard and people will hurt you. Things will go wrong and your plans will fail. And that's okay. But what you can do is control your interpretation of the facts and what you focus on. You may not have control over what has happened, but you can always control what it means. And that might be the most important skill you develop. So the next time you're in a tough spot, ask yourself, how else can I see this? What perspective am I missing here? It might feel forced at first or like you're lying to yourself, but you're not. You're choosing a different lens to view it. Because perspective is everything. It determines how you feel, how you act, what you create, and who you become. If you change your perspective, you can change your life. It is that simple, and that is powerful.